Holy cow! So I was in the middle of that last video, and let me preface by saying, if you couldn't tell by this fantastic camera work I got going on, I'm recording all this on my iPhone because I'm very technologically advanced and I have all this fancy equipment. No, so I only have my iPhone, which I'm recording on, and you can tell by this shaky cam. I apologize. It's the best I got, man. It's the best I got. Anyway, apparently my iPhone was full, so I was recording, and then it's like, oh, you don't have any more storage space here, and it just cut off my video. My bad. I deleted some photos. I deleted some applications that I never used, but I'm gonna want probably tomorrow now that I deleted them. What are you gonna do? You gotta make sacrifices. What can I say? So anyway, let's get back to it. I'm working on chess in Java. Let's go see it. I'm in the middle of it. I apologize for that. So I was in the middle of showing you my move validation. So the user enters in a move via the keyboard. It goes to a function or a method to determine if what the user typed in is valid. So I was just showing you the first part of this basically just sees if what they typed in even makes sense in the context of the game. So did they type in valid coordinates? And was the start coordinate a place where they have a piece to even be moved? And if they do, then that first function, check move, passes it off to another function. Let's see if we can find out what that's called here. Let's go back to our code. So what is it? Check move will pass it off to check piece move. So what check piece move will do is check if that move is valid for that particular type of piece. So if it's a pawn, it'll see, is this move a valid pawn move? If it's a queen, it'll see, is this a valid move for a queen to make? And so forth and so on. So currently, with my check piece move method here, I'm only checking for pawn moves. That's as far as I've gotten in my development here. So I think, like I briefly mentioned, there's arrays, which is what I'm storing my board in basically, and that starts at 0, 0 and goes to 13, 13. What the user types in and what the user sees, if I scroll up here real quick, is these coordinates here, A through N and 1 through 14. So the first thing I want to do when I check if it's a valid move, and what I do throughout, is basically translate what the user entered to what the array is. So let's look at my board one more time real quick. So if the user entered in, let's say they want to move this black pawn, so if their start coordinate, what they entered in was E13, E13, I need to translate that to what the array piece is. So what is this piece in the array? So that would be, it starts with the rows, so 0, 1. So it'll be 1, then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will be 1, 4 is what this position really is in my array. So the user types in E13, and I have to translate that to 1, 4. So when I do this stuff, when I do this development, I always write things on pieces of paper, and I check my math, and I do all this translation, and when I get it right, I finally test it out, and I make sure it's actually correct. I think it was a little blurry there, sorry about that. So anyway, in my move checking validation, I would have to do that computation, to do that conversion numerous times. So instead I just declare some integer variables here to store that calculation so I don't have to repeat it again and again and again. Makes my code a little shorter, a little easier to read. But here is the code for that translation. It gets a little long there. For some of them it's easy, so for column it's a little bit easier. This stuff basically converts my ASCII to a number. So if you Google ASCII chart, you'll get a nice chart. You'll see that a capital A gets translated to the number 65. So I basically get my letter, I subtract 65 from it, and that'll give me a 0 through 13 number, which will go nicely into my indexing into my array. So that's the original column. My original row is a little more complex because if you remember, technically it goes from 14 to 1 on the board. It would have been nice if it was 1 to 14, but it's 14 to 1. Stupid chess rules. So I subtract 13 from my translated number to get my 0 through 13. I use this ternary operator here. You could Google that. Basically, it's an if-else statement. It's very nifty. So basically I say if the index here is a backslash, so if you remember the user types in their starting coordinate, a backslash, the ending coordinate. So if it's a backslash there, then I do something, otherwise do something else. So that's the ternary operator. It's very handy. It's much cleaner than doing an if-else. So I do that for my new column and my new row as well. I convert what the user typed in to what it needs to be into index into my array, which I then do here. I index into my board using the original row and the original column to get the piece that is on that space, and then I have the piece so I can determine what type the piece is. So is it a pawn, is it a knight, is it a queen, etc. And so I will continue on with my validation. So if it's a pawn, then I check if the move is valid for a pawn. First I have to check my player. So pawns are a little special than other piece types. So if there's a rook or whatever, I don't know what my pieces are. Let's just say bishop. I know bishops go diagonally. So bishops can go diagonal no matter what color, well, no matter what, if they're white or black or silver or gold, they always go diagonally. Pawns are different. They can only go forward. You can only move them up if you're white, or you can only move them down if you're black. If you're silver, you can only move them to the right. And gold, you can only move them to the left. So pawns are a little more specialized and they have more rules to their movement, basically. So I have to check what team they're on to see if they're moving correctly. So if it's white, it can only move up. So if I'm trying to move my white pawn down, that's an invalid move. And that's particular to my chess piece type. So I have to do that validation in this method, or that's how I chose to do it. So the first thing I check is if it's the same columns for white or black because they move up and down. If it's silver or gold, I'll check if it's the same rows. So basically, I'm checking to see if they're going straight up or down because that's the only way pawns can move unless they're going diagonally to capture a piece. But my first step is to see if they're going up or down. And then basically, I will do another ternary operator here. So if I'm on the white team, I can only move one space up. But because I'm using an array, going up is going back in my array. So remember, my array starts at 0 at the top, 13 at the bottom. So -1 will be going up my array, if you think of it like that. If I'm not white, then I gotta be black, so they can move down. And again, moving down in the array, or moving down on my board, is actually moving up, if you think about it, in my array. So it's all very confusing. Yeah, you just gotta make sure you keep track of it all. It's complicated. And then I have to check if the next spot I'm moving to is occupied. So if a pawn is moving straight up or down, they can't move to a spot that's occupied, obviously. So I check that. Or I check to see if they can move those two pieces, those two spots at the beginning. So I have to check if they're in a starting location and where they're going isn't occupied, and the spot that they're basically jumping over isn't occupied as well, because you can't jump over another piece. Otherwise, return invalid. Here I'm checking a diagonal move. I take the absolute value, because you can move left or right. You can go up one and move left or right. So my absolute value checks if it's moving only one over left or right. And then I gotta make sure that the new place I'm going has to be occupied by a piece, and it has to be occupied by a piece that is owned by another player. So if let's just look at my board, it'll be easier. So if I have a pawn here and I've got another white piece diagonally up here, my white pawn cannot move to that place. The piece that is there diagonally has to be owned by another team. So that has to be a black piece or a silver piece or a gold piece. Right? Makes sense. And then I do the same for silver or gold. Again, those are moving left and right, so the rules are basically the same, but they're kind of inverted. You got to invert the columns on the rows, basically. And that is all I have for the validation. Assuming everything's okay, it's a valid move, I return okay. So then it processes the move, and this actually moves my pieces. So I update my board, I move the piece to the new location, and I remove it from the old location, and then I update my board. I'm running on that 10-minute mark. I want to finish up this video really quick. Print board just prints out everything. So it'll print out all this nice pretty stuff down here. Ooh, pretty. So I'll do my A through N at the top, print out some of these nice lines. It does some math to loop through my board array and prints out the board piece.image. And that is about it for this Java 4-player chess game. Stay tuned to my next video where I say screw you Java and I move to C# using the XNA framework. Thanks for watching.